everyone, welcome back to our channel and welcome back to Speaking Saturdays. I know it's been a long break, but I'm back and I hope to be a lot more regular. By the way, if you haven't done this already, you might want to join our Facebook group where I give a lot of one-on-one advice and essay reviews and things like that. So I'll leave the link down in the comments. Just make sure to join the group if you're looking for a lot more advice. Yeah, let's begin. So here's what we have for part one. Looks like there's questions about street markets. That's fun and that's obviously very relatable. So do you enjoy visiting street markets? I really do. In fact, most of the shopping that I do, if I go outside, I mean, of course, there's, two types of shopping these days. There's offline shopping and there's online shopping. So when I'm going like outside in the real world and I'm doing any kind of shopping, it's usually, even if you're talking about like groceries and stuff like that, at least in my country, it's super popular. You just have these people that sell fruit and vegetables and all kinds of things just, on the sides of the streets. Of course, we have, all these malls and supermarkets and stuff like that. Those are also popular and I go there as well. But I feel like I get a better deal from these street markets. And, you can even actually find shoes and clothing and even handbags sometimes. And I'm talking like real leather handbags, from like these street markets. So I feel like, and this is not just like my opinion, a lot of people do this. It's like really popular in my city. Most, young women and even older women just love street shopping. This is a huge thing here, Do you enjoy shopping in the mall or street markets? Well, it depends. Malls have their own kind of, it depends on the kinds of things you're looking for. For example, I was looking for a nice new handbag a few years ago. And the styles that you usually find in street markets tend to be a little bit rustic, a little bit, like a little bit traditional in style. And I wanted something very sleek, very elegant, kind of like an old world charm. And of course, it had to be like pure leather because I don't buy like cloth bags, plastic bags, stuff like that that just breaks down really easily. I wanted something that will last, so I went to this bag store in a mall, and that's I think where you make a decision. Okay, where do I shop from? I think that really depends on the kind of thing that you're looking for, right? Because a street store will not really have the same things on display that a mall has. So me personally, I mean, I find both of them enjoyable. I don't particularly think that one is better than the other. Of course, both of them, they have their pros and cons. But I mean, if I had to pick just one for the rest of my life, I would maybe just pick street markets. What kind of things do people usually buy in street markets? Okay, so in my country, like I said, groceries and stuff like that, almost everyone buys groceries in the open, street market. And then there's, of course, clothes and, there's a lot of specialty stuff. Like, let's say you want to buy luggage, really good, high quality, long lasting luggage, not just some flimsy old thing. So for things like that, you definitely need to go to a mall, but like, you can still find pretty decent options even in street markets. And of course, if you're looking for specific, traditional items, like there's some kinds of textiles, there's some kinds of shoes. There's a state here that's well known for a specific type of really pointy shoe that's made of like good leather, and it's got this, conical type of design. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, even food, there's certain types of, pickles and snacks and stuff like that. Again, that varies because there's a lot of diversity in my country. So depending on where you're at, all these really traditional items, I'm not saying you won't find them in malls, but they tend to not really be very authentic, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that, you're better off going to a street market. So yeah. Are there many street markets in your nation? Like literally my country is full of street markets. Wherever you go, I mean, in some parts of the country, you're probably more likely to find street markets than malls. I mean, I live in the biggest city. I live in Bombay. So, I mean, here it's like, I would say it's like an even mix because obviously it's hyper urban where I live. So my world is a little bit different, but if you go to like a more rural area, right, you might not even find malls. You might not even find like these traditional, like Walmart and stuff like that, huge malls, or even like smaller ones with just like 2 stories. You might not even find such a thing in some rural and even suburban markets. Of course, that's not the case all around the country because again, there's just so much diversity. So yeah, I mean, no matter where you go, the truth is you will find all kinds of street markets. Now, you can't say the same thing for malls, of course. Now let's go on to section 2. Talk about the skills you've learned from an older person that you know. You should say who the person was, what you learned, and how, whether it was difficult or not. Now, this older person can be absolutely anyone. Anyone that's older than you. It could literally even be someone in school who was like when you were in 5th grade and they were in like 6th grade and they helped you. It could be a parent, it could be a professor, teacher, your boss, your employer, your grandparent, a relative in the family, anyone. So, don't let like this confuse you in any way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific person. It can be absolutely anyone as long as they're older than you. Even if they're just 1 year older than you, they don't necessarily have to be 50 years older than you. Okay, so I'm not going to take any preparation time. I'm just going to dive straight in. So I remember when I first started working at this little Cambridge Prep Institute. It was for kids. And I think that was my first job working with young kids. Like they were like 4 years of age, 5, 6 years of age. So they were in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade max. And they, so the woman that employed me, she was actually a colleague in this teacher training course that I did a few years ago. Like not a few years ago, that was probably 10 years ago or more. So she wasn't that much older. I mean, maybe she was like 15 years older than me or so. I'm just guessing because, she had like 2 kids and stuff that were quite grown up. So so she, was looking for someone to help out at her center to teach. And so she was like, okay, she knew me. And so she was like, okay, this person could be the right fit. Now, the thing is, that was like the very first I had other jobs before. But working with such young kids, that was like my first experience. And so I didn't really know a whole lot, right? The training course that I did was really just for adults, teaching adults. And so she really kind of taught me all the ropes. It was, and you know what? She was such a great boss. I still remember her very fondly to this day, even though like I've, moved on from doing jobs. I have my own thing now. But I think she also proved to be a really good model for what kind of employee you should be. There was never a stressful moment. And there were a lot of things that I didn't know. Like, for example, writing on the board, right? Now with kids, you really want to make everything super colorful, use all these different markers, and really bring your liveliness into the classroom. It can't be the same way you teach adults, of course. And, she was really patient with me as well. There was a lot of times I remember I made not like really bad mistakes, but I definitely screwed up here and there. Maybe, like I took a book home, which I wasn't supposed to. They had strict rules about that. But she never like, blew up at me or something. So, learning to handle, because again, we had like groups of kids, right? Sometimes we'd have 5 kids, but sometimes we'd end up having 9 or 10 kids. And these were like young, rambunctious kids. So it was good that I was young back then and I really had the energy to deal with them. And, fortunately the kids loved me too. But she taught me a lot about just managing them. And, like they have a really short attention span, right? So you can't just go to page 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't do it in order. You really have to break up these exercises. Maybe you do, let's say, 5 minutes of a listening activity, and then you let them talk about it, And the funny thing is, they start talking amongst themselves, which, in traditional classrooms, people don't like that when a child speaks in the classroom. But we encourage it because, to the kids, it's like, oh, hey, we're talking to each other. It's fun. But the fact is that they're actually learning from each other. So in that way, it really opened my eyes to how kids really learn. And, our kids, they all ended up doing so well in their exams. And their parents, of course, were really happy as well. So, and then I went on to have other jobs that involved working with kids where, all those skills that I learned ended up coming in pretty handy. So yeah, even though I don't work with kids anymore, my students are all adults. Sometimes even older than me. But you never know what the future holds. I mean, I still consider working with kids very enjoyable. So, I mean, I might even do it sometime, just for fun maybe. But yeah, I mean, I would never feel confident going into a classroom full of children had it not been for her. Okay, let's go on to section 3. Do the things children learn in school differ from their grandparents? Well, of course, in school, again, this is like a controversial opinion, but I personally think school doesn't really teach you the things you need to be successful in life. That really comes from your parents and grandparents, people in your family, even your friends, and, people whom you interact with in the real world. I mean, we should have been, I personally feel like your home environment, let's say your grandparents in this specific case, they'll teach you about the world outside of your four walls, right? They'll teach you things like, let's say, how to interact with other people, right? Of course, you learn about manners in school, but it's basically limited to shut up when someone older than you is talking. So I feel like school kills creativity. It doesn't really foster independent thinking, whereas your family can really do that. And of course, with grandparents, they tend to be really, they tend to be really lenient with their grandkids, of course, and so they tend to, you get a good mixture of, the strict and the lenient if you grow up with your parents and your grandparents, I think, which is of course not something every kid gets to grow up with. But I think that if you have that kind of guidance, because again, they've lived for, like, if you're a grandparent, you're probably at least 50, 60, maybe even like 80 years old, and you have your grandkid. And so all those years of life experience, right? You have a much wider perspective of things. So if I come to an older person with a situation, they would know the right things to do and say, right? I mean, let's say you're a child, you're like, what, 8 years old, and I mean, you regularly encounter situations which you've never encountered before, because, I mean, what, you've only lived 8 years on this planet. So you don't really have, frames of reference for how to do things. You don't really have foresight. You don't really have vision, right? You don't really think about the future when you're a child. You don't think about what happens if I do this thing. But when you have a grandparent guiding you, of course, you learn about those things. But in school, it's just academic, dry stuff. What kind of help do senior citizens need from younger people? So I think in terms of help, you really need to be careful if you want to offer help to an older person. You don't want to sound patronizing, right? They're older, yes, they're not as fit as they used to be, but they're not stupid, right? So that's kind of like one thing that I observe, is that people treat older people as if they're like, as if they're like, in a sense, children, right? That, oh, this person doesn't know anything, and oh, they need to, be, treated like kids, which is really kind of dehumanizing. So in terms of the help they need, I think it's largely just centered around security, especially when we're talking about really old people, right? Let's say they're living alone, maybe they're, widowed or divorced, or maybe they don't have their kids living around them. I think security becomes a major concern, because, what are they supposed to do if they have a fall, right? Who is gonna, do a welfare check on them? Who's gonna come and get them the help they need, right? And of course, a lot of older people tend to be on medication for a lot of things, controlling their blood pressure and, preventing strokes and stuff like that. So ensuring that they have, I think, a community is also beneficial, because as you grow older, I mean, it's a fact that I'm experiencing now as well. It's more difficult to make friends, to really kind of go out. Of course, it's not a universal truth for every single person, but it's a general kind of fact. And so, if you give these people opportunities to socialize, especially with younger people, I feel like when you have like a young adult and, an older person, a senior person, and they have a friendship or a bond or a relationship of any kind, it helps both parties, really. It's kind of a nice, congruence. The older person obviously feels like, I'm a part of the world. They don't feel like, yeah, I'm just old. I'm like 80 years old and just, waiting for death. So yeah, a lot of, mental support, and of course, just caring about the physical health aspect as well. I think that's equally important. What kind of benefits do the aid giver and the aid receiver get from interacting with each other? If you're confused by this word, aid just means help. So what do both parties get from interacting with each other? So just to kind of piggyback from what I said earlier, like I was saying, when a young adult or even a middle-aged adult, I mean, as long as there's a significant age gap. So when you've got all these, different age groups and they form some kind of bond, some kind of relationship with each other, they do benefit equally. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? It's not like parasitical in any way, because the older person feels like, yes, I'm part of a community. I'm like still, in touch with how the world functions. For example, this isn't like a super old person who's a professor in college, and she wasn't old. She was just like maybe 40, 50 years old. But I was just like maybe 19 or 20 years old at the time. So she was like, I was typing something, but I typed super quick. And she noticed me for a while, and she was like, oh my God, you have to, teach me how to type that quickly. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so I spent a couple hours in the library. And of course, I mean, she can't type as fast as I do because you need, years of experience. But, I taught her a few things about touch typing and things like that. So you get to really benefit from the younger person's, know-how, knowledge. I mean, I'm a millennial. And yet, when I think of like these 14, 15, 16-year-olds on the internet, they know a lot more than me, by the way, things about, social media. And I mean, I still don't know what Snapchat really is, and I'm not like some boomer or something, but it's just a fact, when you're younger, all these new things, you're much, much more aware. And so you can, teach that to an older person. And, when you're the younger person in a, any kind of friendship, relationship, otherwise with an older person, you get to learn from their experience, from their wisdom. I mean, of course, you can learn the hard way. You can learn from your own experience, which is not bad, by the way. But isn't it just smarter to piggyback off someone else's experience? When let's say you have some kind of dilemma, or you're trying to decide on something, or you have a problem, and you approach someone who's like 60, 70, 80 years old maybe. They have all these decades of experience that definitely beats any experience you have had, right? So whether it's like, should I quit my job? I hate my boss. Or should I go to university even though I hate studying? Whatever it is, they can give you real advice that can really change your life. And in my case, the way that, I mean, the point that I find myself in at the moment right now, I wouldn't have been here had it not been for all these older people in my life, right? Like my mom, professors in university as well. And they really kind of shape your life in a way, in a positive way. But of course, I mean, with any relationship, it can be positive, it can be negative. That really depends on, individual circumstances. Do you believe in helping older people you don't know? Why? So this kind of depends. I mean, let's say, I'm like walking outside and I see an obviously older person and they're struggling to cross the street because traffic can get crazy here. I wouldn't mind, like, just helping them, cross. I think anybody would do that. But it depends on the kind of help, right? Because I mean, if it's like, oh, I can't find this address or something, of course I'll, give you directions. Or if it's not too far off, I might walk with you. But if it's like too far off, if I feel like something shady is going on, then of course I'm not going to do it. You have to use your instincts, right? And so it depends on the kind of help, because again, you're a stranger, I don't know you. So, and again, I live in a very fast-paced city, so you know how it is with city people. It's just we have so many things to do, and you can't always just, you don't always have the time. So given the fact that this person is a stranger, but at the same time, they're older, so you feel like, yeah, as a society, as a community, we really should be helping people, who are obviously, frail, look out, for them. I would do things, yeah, as long as they're reasonable and don't really take up a lot of my time. Because at the end of the day, I got things I have to do. But yeah, I think there's definitely a limit to what you can do for a person that's essentially a stranger to you. But yeah, I mean, basic courtesy goes a long way, I think. So yeah, that was that. That was a fun round of questions. And we're at the 20-minute mark almost. Oh, gee, okay. Well, like I said, don't forget to join our Facebook group. You get a lot more advice there. And I'll see you next week. Again, I'm going to try and be very regular from now on. We're also going to do an essay on Wednesday or Thursday. So check in on the channel back then.